I think this applies to most creatives. We focus a bit too much on one aspect of our work. We're mostly interested in improving our craft, keeping up to date with all the developments in our field, and getting better in general in what we do. That's all fine and good, but we often neglect a really important aspect of our work, and that's the money side of things. Creatives usually treat money as an afterthought, something that's nice to have, but it's not the top priority. And it shouldn't be that way. Money plays a really important role not only in our professional, but also our day-to-day life. So I think it's important to highlight this area a little bit more, and that's why I'm dedicating a whole video about this subject. And more specifically, the most boring but extremely important aspect of money: budgeting. From my experience with my immediate circle, no one really likes budgeting, but creatives in particular are in a league of their own. They absolutely despise it. Probably because the first thing that comes to mind is pages and pages of Excel sheets, and there's absolutely nothing sexy about Excel. But I can assure you, you don't have to touch Excel at all. So, let's start with the fundamentals. What is budgeting? It's essentially your spending plan for the month, or once you get more comfortable with it, your spending plan for several months in advance. You're basically putting down in writing what money goes where. At this point, we need to make a distinction. Tracking your spending is not really budgeting. You're just noting down what you've purchased. For example, if I look at my bank account and I see €1,000 and then I go buy a phone with that money, I haven't really achieved anything by tracking the expense. I still need to pay my bills or the rent at the end of the month. So the only thing I did there was document my very bad decision. So we need a more proactive way of dealing with our expenses. There are several approaches to budgeting, but in my experience, the best out of all of them is zero-based budgeting. Let's say that we're working with a monthly salary of €2,000. With a zero-based budgeting approach, we'll have to split this money into all the expenses we're planning to incur: rent, traveling, and so on and so forth, until there's none left. As they say in YNAB, the application I'm using for budgeting, we're giving every single dollar a job. Let's see it in practice inside YNAB. This is a dummy list of the most typical categories. Notice that it's not just the immediate monthly expenses, but also some expenses we will stumble on in the future. For example, replacing the computer or planning for Christmas gifts, etc. Now with our €2,000, we'll just go through all the categories and assign a dollar amount, until there's zero money left. With this approach, we've managed several different things. First off, we can immediately see that all the important categories like rent and bills are all taken care of. So whatever's left can be used in our secondary categories. Second of all, categories that we often neglect to budget for, like vet visits, insurance, or repairs, are already taken into account. So when the time comes to pay these off, there's not going to be a mad rush to find any spare money. It's just going to be there in the category, ready for us to use it. We can even do fancier things like setting up goals. For example, let's say that we need €350 by June for regular car maintenance. We can set up the goal and the software will tell us how much more we need in order to reach it. So here it tells us that we need to assign a bit more in this category. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll assign the €834, and once we do that, it tells us that we need to fix the overdraft because there's no money left. We can easily fix that by taking out money from another category. Currently, the music category is not that important, so we'll go ahead and reduce the amount there. Nice and easy. The other thing that budgeting allows us to do is to avoid scenarios like the one with the phone I've mentioned before. We no longer make decisions based on what money is left in the bank account, which can be deceiving, but what is there in the individual category. It's what YNAB users call YNAB poor. It's a situation where you have a ton of money in your account, but you run out of money in a specific category. Budgeting is not as rigid as you might think. Let's say, for example, that we want to go out on a lavish night out with friends, but the fun money category is not as buffed as we would have liked. First off, that's a good indication that we could just invite friends over rather than going out. But if it's a special occasion, we could just try and find the extra money we need by rebalancing things. We could take money out of one category and add it to the fun money category. Of course, we won't take money out of an important category like rent, but the dining out category seems to have some extra funds, so that's what we'll do. This procedure achieves two things. There's no guilt when we eventually spend the money because it's all accounted for, and we also prioritize our expenses based on our needs. So it's a win-win scenario. Budgeting allows us also to be more forward-thinking. For example, it helps break the paycheck-to-paycheck pattern. Or, in an even better scenario, once we've budgeted for a longer period of time, build a buffer big enough to have, for a lack of a better word, you money. And having you money is extremely important for your mental health. So if at some point you decide you've had enough and you want to quit your job, there won't be any stress involved with the decision. You already know you're covered, and you also know for how long you're taken care of. So now that we have the basics down and we understand the advantages of having a budget, which are the best apps for that? There's a ton of them out there and most of them are good enough. But instead of trying out all of them and tearing your hair out, I'll give you two options. One that is cheap and one that's more expensive. The expensive one is YNAB, and the cheaper one is called Budget with Buckets. They both use the zero-based budgeting approach, so even if you don't want to use any of these two, make sure that your app has that feature. YNAB is the application I've been using for more than 9 years now, and a few issues aside, it's pretty much perfect. It's super fast to note down your expenses and adjust your budget. Along with the desktop version, it has a mobile client that uses GPS to track your location, so noting down your expenses from a frequently visited place like a supermarket is going to be a 5-second affair. It's that fast. It's the application I recommend to family and friends, but unfortunately the past couple of years it became more and more difficult to do so, mainly because they went the subscription route, and just a couple of months ago they've also increased the price. I still consider it to be the best budgeting app out there, but I do also understand that people might find the barrier of entry a bit too steep. I would say if you're on the fence about it, just use the demo version, see if it suits you, and then make up your mind. On the other hand, the second option, Budget with Buckets, is extremely affordable. It uses the perpetual model, so it's a buy once and use forever affair, at least for the version you bought. And on top of that, the pricing adjusts to accommodate salaries of different countries. So before you purchase, make sure to check if you're eligible for a discount. Is it as polished as YNAB? No, but we're comparing a one-man team with a medium-sized company. One thing to note here is that Budget with Buckets doesn't have a mobile client, so inputting your expenses is a desktop-only affair. So tracking your expenses is going to take some more time than YNAB. But as far as I know, a mobile app is in the works. YNAB has years of development, so the support and user experience is top-notch. But if you're tight in money or you just don't want to have one more subscription in your hands, Budget with Buckets is the perfect alternative. It's not going to be the most smooth experience, but it's good enough. At this point, I think we should also cover some of the most frequently used arguments about not using a budget. I'm the annoying person talking about budgeting all the time, so I've pretty much heard all the excuses. I'm kind of like the annoying friend who can't stop talking about Bitcoin or Ethereum, but a less annoying version of that. At least I hope so. So let's start with my most favorite one. This couldn't be farther from the truth. Because you don't have a steady income, you need a budgeting plan more than anyone else. So if, for example, we have a good month and we've earned, let's say, 8K, a big percentage of that money would go into a rainy days category. So if in a couple of months the income is back to zero, it's easy to cover the monthly expenses by taking money out of that rainy days category. As you can see, especially for freelancers, budgeting can act as a huge stress reliever. This is another typical argument. People think that they will spend hours upon hours writing down every single cost. In total, I don't really think I spend more than 5 or 10 minutes a month adding my expenses into YNAB. It's really fast and painless. Each transaction will probably take you a couple of seconds to input, especially when you visit the same places over and over again. Things like supermarkets, gas stations, pubs, stuff like that. In these occasions, the category, the name of the payee, and the account used will all come pre-populated. So the only thing you need to do in YNAB is add the amount spent. And that's it. This is another typical argument, but this is where budgeting really helps. First, it puts things into perspective. It's one thing to vaguely know your situation, and another one seeing it right there in black and white. For me, this is more empowering than debilitating. It forces you to see where you are, acknowledge it, and try to figure out the next step to improve things. I could go on and on, but you get the point. I would say give any budgeting app a try and see how it works out. I think once you use an app like that for a couple of days, things will start clicking and you will immediately get it. I'll have the links for both YNAB and Budget with Buckets in the description below, so be sure to check those out. And that's it for this video. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.